Captain Lee Taman stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching for kilometers in every direction. Lights blinked across its surface like stars, and ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like insects around a hive. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Park Min-ho from the communication station. His voice was calm, but Taman could hear the excitement underneath. This was it. First official contact with the Galactic Federation. "Put it through," Taman ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that definitely wasn't human. The being had scales that shifted from green to blue, large yellow eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When it spoke, the universal translator kicked in. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Vorthak Republic. You are invited to dock at Bay 94 for processing and evaluation." Taman stepped forward. "Thank you, Ambassador. We're honored to be here." The alien's head tilted slightly. "Processing is standard procedure for all new species. Please bring no more than 10 representatives." 2 hours later, Taman found himself walking through corridors that were clearly not designed for humans. The ceilings were too high, the doors too wide, and everything had a strange blue tint that made his eyes water. Beside him walked Dr. Kim Subin, their best xenobiologist, and Park Min-ho, who had turned out to be surprisingly good at alien languages. Ambassador Veltar led them to a large room filled with beings from at least 6 different species. Some looked like walking crystals, others had too many arms, and one group seemed to be made of living metal. All of them turned to stare at the humans. "Please sit," Veltar said, gesturing to chairs that were the wrong size and shape. "We will begin the standard evaluation." For the next 4 hours, they went through test after test. Questions about human technology, culture, government, and biology. Dr. Kim answered most of the science questions, while Min-ho handled the cultural ones. Taman found himself describing Earth's military structure and explaining why humans had so many different countries. "Interesting," said a crystal being that introduced itself as Counselor Zephyria. "Your species fights among themselves regularly, yet you came here together as one group." "We've learned to work together when it matters," Taman replied. The aliens exchanged looks that Taman couldn't read. One of them, a tall being with 4 arms, pulled Veltar aside, and they spoke in rapid clicks and whistles that the translator couldn't handle. "Your weapons technology is advanced," Veltar said when he returned. "These projectile weapons you call gun. They seem designed specifically to kill other humans." "We've had to defend ourselves," Dr. Kim said carefully. Earth isn't always a safe place. More alien looks. More whispered conversations. The tests moved to practical demonstrations. They wanted to see how humans solved problems. The first challenge was a puzzle box that supposedly tested intelligence. Park Min-ho solved it in 3 minutes. The average time for new species was 2 hours. "Lucky guess," one alien muttered. The second test was a survival scenario simulation. They put Dr. Kim in a virtual environment where everything was trying to kill her. Radiation, poison gas, extreme temperatures, and hostile creatures. Most species lasted 15 minutes before the stress made them give up. Dr. Kim lasted 4 hours and actually started enjoying herself. She figured out how to use the poison gas to kill the creatures, turned the radiation into a power source, and built a shelter that protected her from the temperature swings. The room went very quiet. "Perhaps we should try the combat simulation," suggested the 4-armed alien. "I don't think that's necessary," Veltar said quickly. "We've seen enough." But Taman stepped forward. "We'd like to try it, if that's okay." 20 minutes later, Taman was in a virtual arena facing 3 opponents: a Vorthak warrior, a crystal soldier, and something that looked like an angry bear with tentacles. The simulation was supposed to test combat instincts and tactical thinking. The aliens expected him to fight defensively, maybe try to negotiate. Instead, Taman immediately went on the attack. He used the environment against his opponents, turned their strengths into weaknesses, and won the fight in under 2 minutes. When he came out of the simulator, every alien in the room was staring at him. "Have you had military training?" Veltar asked. "Standard Earth education," Taman replied. "We all learn basic tactics in school." "All of you?" the crystal being asked. "It's useful knowledge," Dr. Kim said with a shrug. The final test was supposed to measure how humans would react to a crisis situation. They presented a scenario where a space station was losing life support, had hostile aliens attacking, and was about to crash into a planet. Most species panicked or froze up. The three humans immediately started working together. Park Min-ho took charge of evacuation procedures, Dr. Kim figured out how to fix the life support using spare parts, and Taemin planned a defense against the attackers. They solved the entire crisis in 12 minutes. Normal time was 3 hours, and most species only managed to save half the people. This is unusual, Veltar said, looking at his datapad. Your scores are beyond our normal ranges. Is that bad? Minho asked. No. It just means we need to adjust your classification. The aliens huddled together, speaking in their clicking language. Taemin could hear words like dangerous and unexpected and category yellow. Finally, Veltar returned. Congratulations. Humanity is hereby classified as category yellow. Moderate development with special notation for adaptive capabilities. You are welcome to join the Galactic Federation. The humans smiled and shook hands with various alien appendages. It seemed like everything had gone well. What they didn't know was that category yellow was supposed to be the highest rating given to new species. And the special notation was code for watch these ones carefully. In the secure communication room later that night, Veltar sent a message to Federation Command. The humans are unlike anything we've encountered. They solve problems by methods we consider impossible. They enjoy challenges that would break other species. Recommend immediate monitoring. Meanwhile, on the Soul's Pride, Captain Lee Taemin was already making plans for human colonies throughout Federation space. Earth was nice, but there were so many interesting worlds out there. Worlds with challenges that might actually be fun to tackle. The galaxy had no idea what it had just invited in. Commander Choi Jae-won wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked across the landscape of Kepler 442b. 6 months ago, this planet had been nothing but rocks, acid rain, and radiation levels that would kill most species in hours. Now green plants were starting to grow in the protected valleys. And the air was actually breathable if you didn't mind a little burning sensation in your lungs. How are the atmospheric processors working? He asked Engineer Odeho, who was checking readings on a tablet that had been specially hardened to survive the planet's conditions. Better than expected, Deho replied with a grin. The radiation is actually helping speed up some of the chemical processes. We might have a full atmosphere in 2 years instead of 5. Jae-won nodded. The Federation had told them Kepler 442b was impossible to terraform. Too much radiation, too unstable, too dangerous. That's exactly why the humans had picked it. Where was the fun in terraforming a planet that was already nice? Across the galaxy, Dr. Song Yuna was having similar thoughts as she studied the coral-like structures growing in the oceans of Proxima Centauri b. The Federation had classified this as a garden world, perfect for colonization. Most species would have been happy to just build cities and enjoy the peaceful environment. Humans, of course, had immediately started trying to improve it. The native algae is responding well to the nutrient supplements, she told her research assistant over the comm system. We should be able to increase oxygen production by 30% within a year. Why would you want to do that? Asked Zelnara, a Zenithari scientist who was observing human colonization methods. The atmosphere is already perfect for most species. Yuna looked at her with confusion. But it could be better. Why settle for perfect when you could have amazing? The crystal being's light pattern shifted, and what Yuna had learned was their version of being very confused. On the Federation monitoring station orbiting Proxima Centauri b, Admiral Kexthorian was reviewing reports that made less sense every day. The humans weren't just colonizing worlds. They were transforming them in ways that should have been impossible. They're using solar flares to power their manufacturing plants, reported his aide, a young Vorthok named Terquin. On Kepler 442b, they've somehow turned radiation into a tool for accelerated plant growth. That's not possible, Kexithorian said flatly. I know, sir, but they're doing it anyway. The Admiral pulled up the file on human colonies. In 6 months, they had established settlements on 12 worlds. Not one of them was what other species would consider easy to live on. The humans seemed to actively seek out the most challenging planets they could find. Wolf 359c had gravity 3 times Earth normal. The humans built their cities underground and used the high gravity, to create new forms of manufacturing that produced materials stronger than anything the Federation had ever had a toxic atmosphere that would dissolve most metals. The humans developed new alloys that not only survived but actually got stronger when exposed to the poison air. Ross 128b was tidally locked, with one side burning hot and the other frozen solid. The humans built their colony right on the border between day and night and used the temperature difference to generate unlimited clean energy. "Sir," Turquin said hesitantly, "there's something else. The psychological profiles from their colonies." Kexthorian looked at the data, and his crystals darkened with concern. Normal colonists showed signs of stress, homesickness, and anxiety when settling new worlds. The human colonists were showing signs of happiness, excitement. They were actually enjoying the impossible conditions. On Kepler 442b, Commander J1 was indeed enjoying himself. He stood on a cliff overlooking the first human city on the planet, watching construction crews work in environmental suits that looked more like armor than protection. Gear. "The next valley over has some interesting mineral formations," reported Captain Lee Minsu from the Geological Survey team. "High concentrations of rare metals, but they're in an area with electromagnetic storms that would fry most electronics." "Sounds perfect," J1 replied. "When do we start mining?" "You want to mine in an area that has lightning storms that could kill you?" Minsu asked. "We'll figure out how to use the lightning," J1 said with confidence. "Maybe we can store the energy somehow." Back on the Federation monitoring station, Admiral Kexthorian was receiving similar reports from every human colony. They weren't just surviving impossible conditions, they were turning those conditions into advantages. "They've weaponized a solar flare," Turquin reported, his voice shaking slightly. "What do you mean, weaponized?" "On Wolf 359C, they're using focused solar radiation to mine asteroids. They turn the star itself into a tool." Kexthorian felt something he hadn't experienced in his 300 years of life: genuine fear of another species. Not because they were hostile, but because they made the impossible look easy. On Proxima Centauri b, Dr. Yuna was making a discovery that would soon worry the Federation even more. She had been studying the native wildlife, trying to understand how the ecosystem worked. What she found was that the local creatures had evolved to be incredibly efficient, but not very adaptable. "They're perfect for their environment," she explained to Zelnara. "But if anything changed, they'd probably die out." "That is normal," the crystal being replied. "Most life forms evolve to fit their world perfectly. But that makes them fragile," Yuna said. "On Earth, everything had to be ready for change all the time. Ice ages, volcanoes, meteor impacts, climate shifts. The creatures that survived were the ones that could adapt to anything." She paused, looking at the peaceful alien fish swimming in the clear water. "No wonder humans seem so intense to other species. We come from a world that was constantly trying to kill us. This must be what it's like for a soldier to take a vacation." The comment was recorded by Federation monitoring equipment and forwarded to Admiral Kexthorian, who immediately called an emergency meeting with Federation Command. "We may have made a serious error in judgment," he reported to the Council of Alien Leaders. "The humans aren't just another spacefaring species. They're survivors from a world that apparently specializes in creating survivors." Counselor Zephyria's light patterns showed deep concern. Explain. "Every challenge we've seen break other civilizations they treat as entertainment. Radiation, gravity, toxic atmospheres, electromagnetic storms, they turn these things into tools. They don't just adapt to hostile environments, they improve them." "Are they a threat?" asked Veltar. Kexthorian considered the question carefully. "Not in the traditional sense. They haven't shown any aggressive intentions toward other species. But they're changing things. Everywhere they go, the impossible becomes possible. They make other species question what we thought we knew about survival." As if to prove his point, a new report came in from the human colony on Ross 128b. They had successfully redirected the planet's rotation, turning the tidally locked world into one with a normal day-night cycle, something that should have required the resources of an entire galactic civilization, accomplished by 3,000 human colonists using spare parts and determination. "We need to upgrade their classification," Kexthorian said quietly. "Category Yellow is no longer adequate. In the Federation database, Humanity's file was updated with a new classification. Category Orange, Unpredictable. Development with extreme adaptive capabilities. It was the highest rating ever given to a species after first contact. It would not be their final rating. Major Han Wujin was enjoying his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. Through the windows of the human garrison on Tau Ceti III, he could see Federation ships fleeing the system as fast as their engines would carry them. That was never a good sign. Sir, Sergeant Kim Hee-jin burst into his office without knocking. We've got Skorax ships dropping out of hyperspace. Lots of them. Wujin set down his coffee with a sigh. He'd been hoping for a quiet tour of duty on this research station. Tau Ceti III was supposed to be safe, boring, and far from any threats. The kind of place where the biggest excitement was usually a malfunctioning food processor. How many ships? He asked, already reaching for his armor. 57 confirmed, Hyejin replied. And they're launching drop pods. Looks like a full invasion force. Wujin did some quick math in his head. The human garrison consisted of exactly 200 Marines. The Federation research station housed 50,000 civilians from 12 different species. Standard Skorax invasion forces typically numbered in the tens of thousands. His comm unit crackled to life. All Federation forces, this is Admiral Kexathorian. Immediate evacuation is ordered. Tau Ceti III is lost. Repeat immediate evacuation. Wujin picked up the comm and responded. Federation Command, this is Major Wujin. Requesting permission to handle the situation. There was a long pause. Major, did you not understand the evacuation order? The Skorax have deployed at least 50,000 warriors. Understood, Admiral. 200 humans versus 50,000 Skorax. Requesting permission to engage. Another pause, even longer this time. Major, are you suffering from some kind of mental breakdown? No, sir. Just asking for permission to do our job. On the Federation command ship, Admiral Kexathorian looked at his staff with genuine confusion. Did he just ask permission to fight 50,000 Skorax with 200 soldiers? I believe so, sir, replied Turquin. Should we send a medical team? Before Kexathorian could answer, Major Wujin's voice came through the comm again. Admiral, if you're not going to give us permission, we'll just do it anyway. But it would be nice to have official approval. Back on Tau Ceti III, the first Skorax drop pods were hitting the ground. Each pod contained 20 warriors. Insectoid creatures the size of small vehicles with armor plating, razor-sharp claws, and a hive mind that made them nearly impossible to surprise or outmaneuver. Sergeant Kim Hyejin was setting up defensive positions with her squad when she heard the distinctive sound of Skorax mandibles clicking. Contact front, she called out, raising her rifle. The first wave of Skorax came around the corner of a research building like a living tsunami of chitin and death. Most species would have broken and run at the sight. Hyejin's Marines opened fire with the calm precision of people who had trained for exactly this situation. Target the joints, called out Captain Lee Minsu over the squad comm. Their armor's weakest where the segments connect. The human weapons weren't the most advanced in the galaxy, but they were loud, fast, and designed by a species that had spent thousands of years figuring out how to kill things efficiently. The Skorax had never faced anything quite like them. What made it worse for the Skorax was that humans didn't fight the way other species did. Federation military doctrine was based on formations, overwhelming firepower, and careful tactical planning. Humans fought like persistence hunters who had learned to use tools. Dr. Yoon Ji-won, the garrison medic, found herself treating wounded Marines in a bunker that was supposed to be for medical supplies. Through the wall, she could hear the sounds of battle getting closer. Doc! A wounded Marine was brought in by two of his squad mates. Skorax claw got through his armor. Yoon looked at the wound and immediately started working. On any other world, a Skorax claw wound was considered fatal. Their claws carried toxins that would kill most species in minutes. But human military medics trained for every possible situation, including alien biotoxins. He'll be fine, she told the worried Marines. The human immune system is tougher than most people think. Just need to clean the wound and give him some broad-spectrum antibiotics. Outside, the battle was developing in ways that confused both the Skorax hive mind and the Federation observers. The humans weren't fighting a defensive battle. They were hunting. Sergeant Hyejin led her squad through the research station's maintenance tunnels, moving through spaces too small for the larger Skorax warriors. They would pop up behind enemy positions, eliminate a group of Skorax, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. "This is like urban warfare training back on Earth," she told her squad over the comm. "Except the targets are bigger and uglier." Major Wu Jin was coordinating the battle from the garrison command center. But he wasn't just giving orders. He was learning. Every time his Marines encountered a new Skorax tactic, he adapted their response. When the Skorax started using acid spit, he had his people use the research station's chemical neutralizers. When they began tunneling, he sent teams into the underground utility systems. The Federation observers watching from orbit couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans were actually pushing the Skorax back. "This is impossible," Admiral Kexathorian muttered. "The Skorax have conquered 3 civilizations. They don't lose ground battles." "Sir," Turquin said quietly, "the humans aren't fighting a ground battle. They're hunting." After 12 hours of combat, something unprecedented happened. The Skorax hive mind, which had never retreated from a ground engagement, began pulling its forces back to defensible positions. The humans immediately pressed their advantage. Captain Lee Minsu led a strike team into the main Skorax landing zone. Instead of trying to destroy the dropships, he planted explosives that would detonate when the ships tried to take off. Now the Skorax couldn't retreat even if they wanted to. By the second day, the Federation monitoring teams realized that the humans weren't just winning. They were learning the Skorax communication patterns, adapting to their tactics and somehow predicting their movements. "How are they doing this?" Kexthorian demanded. His intelligence officer, a Vorthak named Seltar, had been studying human battle reports. "Sir, I think they're treating this like a puzzle to solve rather than a battle to survive." On the surface, Sergeant Hyajin was proving that point. She had figured out that Skorax warriors communicated through pheromone trails, so her squad started using the research station's chemical lab to create false signals. Soon they were sending groups of Skorax warriors into traps by making them think their own hive mind was calling them. Dr. Yunjiwan had made an even more disturbing discovery. The Skorax biotoxins that were supposed to be universally fatal were having almost no effect on humans. "It's like our immune systems were designed to handle alien pathogens," she reported to Major Wu Jin. "Almost like we've been fighting alien diseases for thousands of years." By the 3rd day, the impossible became reality. The last Skorax warriors were eliminated in a final assault led by Major Wu Jin himself. 200 human Marines had defeated an invasion force of 50,000 Skorax warriors. The Federation casualty report showed the final tally. 47 human wounded, 3 humans killed, 50,000 Skorax dead, and 0 civilian casualties. Admiral Kexthorian stared at the numbers on his screen for a long time before sending his report to Federation Command. "Humanity's classification has been updated to Category Orange with immediate effect," he wrote. "Recommend close monitoring and possible reclassification to Category Red. These beings do not fight like any species we have encountered. They fight like they were born for it." In the medical bay of the Federation monitoring ship, xenobiologists were studying tissue samples from the human wounded. What they found would soon change everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's history. Human DNA showed evidence of surviving not just 1 or 2 mass extinction events, but dozens of them. Earth hadn't just produced a sapient species, it had forged the ultimate survivors through millions of years of constant challenges. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity wasn't just another species with weapons and ships. They were the end product of evolution's most brutal testing ground, finally let loose among the stars. Professor Lim Seok-jin sat in the Federation archives on the Zenithari homeworld, surrounded by data crystals containing the complete historical records of human civilization. What had started as a simple research project for the Federation Cultural Institute had become something much more disturbing. "This can't be right," he muttered, checking the data for the 5th time. According to the geological records from Earth, the planet had experienced major extinction events every few million years. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages, gamma-ray bursts, and climate shifts that should have wiped out all complex life. But somehow, life had not only survived, it had thrived. And the species that eventually became human had lived through all of it. Across the archive facility, Intelligence Officer Nam Tai-hyung was having his own moment of revelation as he studied human recreational activities. He had been asked to analyze human culture for potential military applications, thinking it would be a simple assignment. Instead, he was looking at data that made no sense. Counselor Zephyria, he called to the crystal being who supervised the research project. I need to confirm something. These human activities marked as entertainment, are these accurate? The Zenithari's light patterns shifted to indicate attention. The data comes directly from human sources. Why do you ask? Taehyung pulled up a holographic display showing various human activities. According to this, humans voluntarily jump out of aircraft with only a cloth to slow their fall. They climb vertical rock faces for no practical purpose. They engage in combat simulations where the goal is to defeat other humans. That is correct. And they do this for fun? Apparently so. Taehyung stared at the data in confusion. On my homeworld, our recreational activities involve meditation, artistic expression, and mental puzzles. We don't voluntarily put ourselves in mortal danger. Dr. Park Jisoo, a human xenobiologist who had been working with the Federation research teams, overheard the conversation. Is there something wrong with our hobbies? She asked. Wrong? Taehyung looked at her with genuine confusion. Your children play games that teach tactical thinking and resource management. Your adults engage in activities that would be considered military training by any other species. Your entertainments are scenarios where you overcome impossible odds. Park tilted her head. What do other species do for fun? Activities that don't risk death or require combat skills, Zephyria replied. That sounds boring, Park said honestly. The simple comment sent shockwaves through the research team. What humans considered boring, other species found relaxing and normal. What humans found entertaining, other species would classify as extreme survival training. Professor Lim was reaching similar conclusions from the historical data. He had been studying the evolutionary pressure that shaped human development, and what he found was terrifying in its implications. Earth wasn't just a planet that developed sapient life, he explained to the assembled researchers. It was a forge that created the ultimate survivors. Every major catastrophe that should have ended evolution instead made the survivors stronger. He pulled up a timeline showing Earth's history. Ice ages that lasted millions of years taught early humans to adapt to any climate. Volcanic eruptions that blocked sunlight for decades taught them to find food in impossible conditions. Asteroid impacts that destroyed entire ecosystems taught them to rebuild from nothing. Counselor Zephyria's light patterns showed deep concern. Are you saying that humans evolved specifically to survive extinction events? Not just survive them, Lim replied. To thrive during them. Every time something tried to kill humanity, the survivors came back stronger and smarter. Meanwhile, Taehyung was discovering that the pattern extended far beyond just recreational activities. Human education systems taught children to think tactically from an early age. Their literature was full of stories about overcoming impossible odds. Their music often celebrated struggle and victory against overwhelming challenges. Even their myths and legends follow the same pattern, he reported. Heroes who face monsters survive disasters and emerge stronger. It's like their entire culture is built around the idea that life is constantly trying to kill you, and the proper response is to fight back. Dr. Park nodded. Well, yes, that's basically what life on Earth was like. Constant challenges, constant adaptation, constant improvement. We learned that if something doesn't challenge you, it's probably not worth doing. The research team exchanged glances that Park couldn't interpret. To her, this was just normal human thinking. To them, it was evidence that humans were fundamentally different from every other species in the galaxy. Counselor Zephyria called an emergency session with Federation Command. The preliminary findings were disturbing enough to require immediate attention. From the highest levels of government, we have been evaluating humans by the standards of species that evolved on relatively peaceful worlds, she reported to the assembled leaders. This appears to have been a critical error in judgment. Admiral Kexithorian, who had requested the investigation after the Skorax incident, leaned forward. Explain. Professor Lim presented his findings. Earth's evolutionary environment was uniquely hostile. Mass extinction events occurred regularly throughout the planet's history. The species that eventually became human didn't just survive these events, they were shaped by them. He showed them the genetic analysis that had been conducted on human tissue samples. Human DNA contains markers for surviving radiation exposure, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and pathogenic organisms that don't exist on most worlds. They didn't develop space travel despite coming from a hostile world. They developed it because they came from a hostile world. Intelligence Officer Taehyung added his cultural analysis. Their recreational activities, educational systems, and cultural values all reflect a species that expects constant challenges. What other species consider extreme survival scenarios, humans consider normal training exercises. The implications were staggering. Every other spacefaring species had developed on worlds that were relatively stable and peaceful. They had learned to build civilizations that avoided conflict and maintained stability. Their greatest achievement was creating safe, predictable environments where their people could live without constant threats. Humans had learned the opposite lesson. They had created a civilization that thrived on challenges, actively sought out difficult problems to solve, and viewed stability as a temporary condition to be improved upon. This explains their colonization patterns, Admiral Kexthorian said slowly. They're not looking for safe worlds to settle. They're looking for challenging worlds to conquer. And their military effectiveness, added Veltar. They don't fight to survive, they fight to win. It's what their entire evolutionary history has taught them to do. Counselor Zephyria's light patterns showed the deep blue of extreme concern. We need to consider the long-term implications. If humans continue to spread throughout the galaxy, they will encounter challenges that would destroy other civilizations. And based on their history, they will not just survive these challenges, they will turn them into advantages. The room fell silent as the assembled leaders contemplated what this meant. A species that viewed extinction-level events as obstacles to overcome, a civilization that actively sought out the most dangerous environments in the galaxy and tried to improve them. People who considered mortal peril to be entertainment. What is their current classification? Asked Supreme Counselor Veltharan. Category Orange, Admiral Kexthorian replied. Updated immediately, Veltharan ordered. Humanity is hereby classified as Category Red, Extreme Threat Potential. Institute immediate monitoring protocols and prepare contingency plans. Contingency plans for what exactly? Asked Zephyria. Veltharan's scale shifted to a darker shade. For the possibility that we've invited the galaxy's apex predators to join our peaceful civilization. As the meeting ended and the various delegates returned to their ships, none of them noticed Dr. Park Ji-soo quietly uploading a complete copy of the research data to her personal files. The Federation was learning about humanity, but they had forgotten that humans were also learning about them. And unlike other species, humans had millions of years of experience in adapting to new environments and overcoming hostile forces. The galaxy was about to discover that the greatest threat to peaceful civilizations wasn't war or disaster. It was evolution itself, finally perfected and set free among the stars. Governor Kang Seolgi was reviewing the morning reports from New Busan Colony when the first earthquake hit. Her coffee cup rattled on the desk as the building swayed, but she didn't seem particularly concerned. On a world with 3 active moons and an unstable core, earthquakes were just part of daily life. Magnitude 7.2, reported Chief Engineer Bae Suho over the comm system. Epicenter about 50 kilometers from the main settlement. No major structural damage. Good, Seolgi replied. How are the seismic dampeners holding up? Better than expected. The new design is actually using the earthquake energy to charge our backup power systems. Of course it was. Humans didn't just cope with disasters. They turned them into useful resources. What Governor Seolgi didn't know was that the earthquake was just the beginning. High above the planet, a Federation task force was implementing what they called the final assessment, a carefully orchestrated series of disasters designed to finally understand the true limits of human adaptability. Admiral Kexthorian watched the monitoring displays from his command ship with a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing dread. The Federation Council had demanded proof of whether humans were truly as dangerous as the research suggested, or if they were simply lucky survivors who would break under sufficient pressure. Phase 1 complete, reported Terraquin. Seismic activity has been successfully induced across the primary settlement zone. And the human response? Kexthorian asked. They've somehow turned the earthquakes into a power source and improved their building stability. Colony efficiency has actually increased by 12%. Kexthorian's scales darkened. This was exactly what they had feared would happen. Initiate Phase 2, he ordered reluctantly. On the surface, Colonel Park Yu-jung was enjoying her lunch when the attack sirens began wailing. Through the transparent aluminum windows of the defense center, she could see ships dropping out of hyperspace. Pirates from the Hegemony Syndicate, attracted by reports of a wealthy but poorly defended human colony. How many ships? She asked her tactical officer. 15 heavy cruisers, about 40 fighters, came the reply. Standard rating force. They're demanding surrender and tribute. Yu-jung finished her sandwich and checked her weapons. The New Busan Defense Force consisted of 3 patrol ships, a handful of orbital platforms, and about 200 Marines. By any reasonable military assessment, they were hopelessly outgunned. Send a message to the pirates, she ordered. Tell them they have 30 seconds to leave our system before we consider them hostile. Ma'am? Her tactical officer looked confused. Shouldn't we be asking for terms? 30 seconds, Yu-jung repeated calmly. Above the planet, the pirate commander was having a similar conversation with his crew. Did they just threaten us? He asked in disbelief. I think they did, Captain, replied his communications officer. We outnumber them 15-1. Yes, sir. Send another message. Tell them they have one chance to surrender. The response from Colonel Yu-jung was immediate and clear. 20 seconds. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The human defense force didn't try to fight the pirates ship to ship. Instead, they turned the entire system into a weapon. The orbital platforms that looked like simple mining stations suddenly revealed themselves to be disguised missile batteries. The patrol ships turned out to be fast attack vessels with stealth capabilities that shouldn't have been possible with their apparent technology level. And the planet itself. They've weaponized the asteroid belt, the pirate captain said in growing panic as rocks the size of buildings began accelerating toward his fleet with impossible precision. How is that possible? His navigator demanded. They've been using the mining operations to install guidance systems, Tactical reported. Every major asteroid in the belt can now be used as a kinetic projectile. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the pirate fleet had been completely destroyed without a single human casualty. The humans had somehow turned a mining colony into a fortress that could have held off a Federation battle fleet. In orbit, Admiral Kexathorian stared at the tactical readouts in disbelief. They knew, he said quietly. Sir? Turquin asked. They knew this was a test. They prepared for multiple simultaneous threats. He called up the colony infrastructure reports. Look at these power grid modifications, the redundant communication systems, the resource stockpiles. They've been preparing for something like this since they arrived. On the surface, Phase 3 was already beginning. The carefully orchestrated supply crisis that was supposed to strain the colony's resources found the humans ready with alternatives they had been developing since day one. Chief Engineer Bei Suho was almost cheerful as he reported to Governor Seulgi. The supply convoys from Earth have been mysteriously delayed, but we're actually fine. We've been working on local manufacturing since we got here. Turns out we can make everything we need from local materials. Even the complex electronics? Seulgi asked. Especially the electronics. We found some interesting mineral deposits that work better than what we were importing from Earth. Our computers are actually faster now. The Federation observers watched in growing alarm as the humans not only survived the artificial supply crisis, but used it as an opportunity to become completely self-sufficient. What was meant to be a devastating blow to their economy had instead made them stronger. Phase 4, Admiral Kexthorian ordered, though his heart wasn't really in it anymore. The atmospheric processors that regulated New Busan's air supply began to malfunction, a carefully planned accident that should have forced the colonists to evacuate or face suffocation. Instead, the humans treated it as an engineering challenge. The processors are failing, Captain Young Minji reported to the colony leadership. We have about 6 hours of breathable air in the sealed sections. Options? Governor Seulgi asked. We could evacuate, Chief Engineer Bei suggested with a grin that said he had no intention of doing any such thing. Or we could fix the problem with the backup atmospheric systems we've been developing. We have backup atmospheric systems? We've been working on biological air processing using modified earth plants and local algae. It's actually more efficient than the mechanical processors. We just needed an excuse to switch over. 6 hours later, New Busan had the cleanest air of any colony world in the galaxy. and the humans were talking about packaging the technology for sale to other settlements. Admiral Kexthorian didn't even bother with Phase 5. The pattern was clear. Every challenge they presented to the humans was met not just with survival, but with improvement. The colony was stronger, more efficient, and more advanced after the disasters than it had been before. "Sir," Turquin said quietly, "there's something else. We've been monitoring their communications during the crisis, and they weren't just solving the problems. They were enjoying themselves. Stress levels actually decreased during the emergency situations. It's like they're happier when they're being challenged." Kexthorian slumped in his command chair. The final test had proven what the Federation had most feared. Humans didn't just survive impossible situations, they thrived in them. Challenges that would destroy other civilizations were exactly the conditions under which humans performed at their best. "Prepare the final report," he ordered. "Humanity's classification is to be updated to Category Red, Evolutionary Catalyst. These beings don't just adapt to hostile environments, they transform everything around them. What should we recommend?" Turquin asked. Kexthorian considered the question for a long time. "Integration," he said finally. "If we can't contain them and we can't defeat them, then we need to learn from them. The galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." Down on New Busan, Governor Kang Sulgi was reviewing the day's events with satisfaction. The earthquakes had improved their power systems. The pirate attack had tested their defenses. The supply crisis had made them self-sufficient, and the atmospheric problems had led to a better air processing system. "You know," she said to Colonel Park Yu-jung, "this has been one of our most productive days since we arrived." "Agreed," Yu-jung replied. "We should have crises like this more often." Neither of them knew that their conversation was being recorded by Federation intelligence, or that it would be used as evidence in the report that would change humanity's status forever. The test was over. The humans had passed with honors that exceeded every possible expectation, and the galaxy would never be the same.